Happy Pride from Elaine Marieb College of Nursing. Hooray! I'm Jess Dillard-Wright, and I'm an associate professor here in the College of Nursing. I'm also the associate dean for equity and inclusion. I teach mostly right now in the PhD program, teach philosophy and history of nursing. My clinical background is in trauma critical care. Right now, my kind of scholarly program focuses on the history and philosophy of nursing, looking specifically at the intersection between like our intellectual history in nursing and activism, the way ideas come into nursing and circulate or don't. That has been in my DNA since even before I started nursing school. I think that there's some ways in which it's inevitable that our identities shape like what we're interested in and what we care about. Right? Understanding the way that compulsory heterosexuality like moves, functions, in nursing is important to me because it's something that I've experienced and trying to make sense of it. I think as we make it visible, it becomes easier to talk about. It gives people tools to say, oh, yes, I've experienced that too. And also this like important opportunity to really kind of resurrect or recognize that we actually do have a queer history at nursing. It is not, this sort of like uncomplicated history of like angelic, lovely, middle-class white cis feminine women. And in fact, there is something that's like a queer subaltern space. And the fact that nursing is this homosocial space actually creates possibilities that wouldn't be there otherwise, right? There's this opportunity for like upward mobility, for sort of class mobility, to pay one's own way and therefore not be tied to the sort of heteronormative family structure. And so, it shouldn't surprise us, I don't think, that there's like a distinctly queer history of nursing too. It's partly like making sense of myself. It's partly finding my queer ancestors, right, in this space, our queer ancestors. Peggy Chin is obviously like probably the biggest one. It's hard to underemphasize her influence in nursing, in terms of like nursing epistemology, certainly, but also in terms of looking at sort of the lesbian experience in nursing, making inroads in terms of feminist thought in nursing. Two others that come to mind are Carolyn Innes and David Waldron, and they were the founders of the Gay Nurses Alliance, and they worked out of Philadelphia. They were working with Barbara Giddings, who is known as the mother of gay liberation. Gay Nurses Alliance was really like closely aligned with gay liberation and had a really well-articulated and effective kind of vision for what they were looking for. And it really focused on gay nurses and gay patients. There's some really important things that the Gay Nurses Alliance was able to accomplish, right? David Waldron was eventually elected to the American Nurses Association Cabinet for Human Rights, and he, along with folks like Juanita Hunter and others, were able to, losing the details on what exactly this, whether it was a resolution or like a policy statement, endorsing the sort of acceptance of queer lifestyles, and that was in the 70s. So we have these moments of like real interesting and important movement towards gay and lesbian liberation in nursing that was sort of happening at the end of the 70s and into the early 80s. Often when we're thinking about history of professions, right, sexuality is often kind of off the table as far as like our conversations. We think that profession and sexuality are like kind of separate boxes. And that's sort of been where I've actually been trying to kind of lean into to understand more about the ways in which nursing, which is both historically and currently the largest workforce of women and femmes in the United States, right? So yes, it's a super feminized profession, but it's also like a huge profession that reflects the lived experience of lots of different people. So that sort of makes it this really interesting lens through which to interrogate some things about, the production of gender and the production of sexuality and the way that people experience those pressures both inside the discipline, but also with the extrinsic pressures, right? It's not as if nursing is this thing that's like divorced from the rest of society. Like we experience all of the political kind of angling and ramifications that, everybody else does too. And in some respects, right, because of the feminized aspects of our discipline, we have these like velvet handcuffs, right? So like we have this perception as the most trusted profession, which is like huge amount of social capital. But also because of that, that means everybody thinks they know what we do, and it is really sort of like stringent in terms of its expectations of how you operate as a nurse. I think the other piece of it is like healthcare broadly, right, has so much power in our like society, and to determine what is normal and what is not normal. And in this current political moment, that feels really important. And so as we see things like the rollback of reproductive rights, the threats to queer and trans people, like the existential threats, especially to our trans kin, as we see our immigrant neighbors being detained and lost, as we see the sort of incursion of civil rights and the gerrymandering, disenfranchising our Black neighbors, I think we have to talk about the history here because we've had these struggles before. So when we think about how we can move in the present to in the future, knowing that we have these past models to learn from, or to emulate, to avoid, I think can provide us with some hope and some clarity on like things can be different because they've been different before and they can be different again. Knowing that there are people that walk this road before us is, at least for me, really a helpful reminder that like, oh no, we can do this. This isn't just a queer nurses project, right? This is a project for nurses because like all people need to be cared for in ways that are respectful, thoughtful, generative, and family-centered. And, you know, if we are allowing sort of homophobic, transphobic, ableist, pick your sort of form of oppression, if that's something that's determining care, well, then it's not really care at all. So I think that it's something that we are obligated to think about as nurses.